Three, two, one. Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Drewski with Cryptid Warfare and Conspiracies Podcast and CW Operations and Survival. Hope you guys had a blessed week. And, guys, we got a killer show for y'all. But before we get into that, if you guys got any experiences or anything like that, you guys got any prayer requests or anything, go ahead and hit me up at cryptidwarfare@gmail.com. That's cryptidwarfare@gmail.com. Also, too, if you guys are having any cryptid problems or anything like that when it comes to spiritual warfare or all that about sorts, just go ahead and shoot me an email. It's c.woperations@17905@gmail.com, and we will do what we can to help you all out. You know, we'll go out there and we'll be your guys' liaisons if we have to, or if you need any critter hitters for hire, hit us up. We'll help you all out. And, guys, just want to give a shout out to Kevin, or Where the Weird Ones podcast are, and you guys go ahead and check them out. And my buddy Riley over at Midwest Mythos, and my buddy Doc over at Prometheus Lens, and Jessica Jones over at the Cryptid Huntress. You guys need some good podcasts, go check them out. All right, it's enough of that spiel. Guys, this is going to be good. You know what? We're just gonna get into it, guys. I want to introduce to the show Brian G. Brian, brother, thank you for coming on, man.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, I'm kind of glad we got this going, and was reading through the notes and everything. Man, dude, you guys had a pretty freaky encounter, man. So, and yeah, other than that, brother, yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on, and definitely being flexible, because I know there's some scheduling conflicts on my end for sure. I know that.
No worries at all, my friend.
Yeah, it's all good, man. All right, dude, let's just get into it, brother.
All right.
First of all, before this incident happened, did you believe in cryptids at all or anything like that?
I did. I've always been fascinated with cryptids, Sasquatch, Mothman, Goatman, Dogman, etc. as far back as I can remember. Yeah. But it's always been a passion.
I got you, man. I got you. So where did all that start? Like, did you read something? Did you watch a movie or something like that? Like, how did all that just click on?
My best guess is it was probably an episode of Unsolved Mysteries sometime in the
I love that show, man.
It was the best ever. And, you know, they used to have stuff about Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, and I could never get enough.
Yeah.
Once I saw it the first time, anything on TV, I'd watch it. Any documentary, movie, special, whatever it was. You know, I was interested in everything.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I think it's actually back on, dude. I forgot what it's on. Netflix, Hulu, or something like that. Yeah, because I remember seeing like the title.
Yeah, Netflix launched and it's new episodes on Netflix.
Ah, okay. New episodes.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so is it the same dude?
No.
I was gonna say, if they do, that guy's old if he's still doing it.
That voice that haunted us for years.
Oh yeah, that, and what was the other one? Like the Tales from the Dark Side.
Oh yeah.
I think. Oh yeah.
Tales from the Dark Side, Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah, that was good stuff, man. God, I missed the freaking 80s and 90s. Yeah.
I know that's right completely.
Right on, brother. Yeah, man. So that's pretty cool, man. How you got into that? Yeah. Same thing with me. Unsolved mysteries, stuff like that, comic books, and I forgot what the heck I was watching. Gosh, I think it was like the Patterson Gimlin film. It just they were doing like a documentary on it back in the early 90s, like late 80s, and that just totally just captivated me, man. I was sold. So. Yeah, that's about it for me. So, anyways, yeah, man. Yeah, so go ahead and to your encounter, brother. Let's start from the beginning.
So this would have been late 90s. I was about 16. Mm-hmm. My best friend and I my parents had 11 and have 11 and a half acres in Pennsylvania. We're from Cleveland, and it's the first exit into Pennsylvania over the Ohio line.
Yeah.
They used to have a trailer up there that we used to camp out and stuff like that. And so we were playing paintball, all weekend, my buddy and I. And then we thought it would be a great idea to try to play it at night, maybe duct tape a few laser pointers to it.
Heck
They were
yeah.
just cheap Walmart guns, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that way we could kind of see each other, in the woods, because there's no lights or anything out there. It's still, to this day, it's incredibly rural. So we were out doing our thing, taking shots at each other, trying to, outrun each other, trying to hide and ambush. So I had thought that I had gone around him, and I was cutting through the woods, and I was going to come up behind him. And I saw what I thought was him in the woods, kind of off one of the trails. And I was on another patch of woods leading to that trail, and I saw something moving. And I just assumed it was him.
Yeah.
And, I had this big grin on my face because I thought I had him dead to rights. I was going to walk up behind him and just nail him. So I took my time. I slowly creeped over there, tried not to make any noise. Got in a position. I saw him move again and just started shooting.
Yeah.
And then he didn't react. And I'm like, I swear I hit him. So I moved in a little closer, took another couple shots, and then something stood up. And once it stood up, I realized it wasn't PJ. Because I am 6'8". I was 6'8" at that time. And this thing had me by 2 or 3 feet. It was nuts, huge. Dude.
Yeah.
And it's very unusual for me to have to look up to anybody for that matter. I'm standing there, and this thing's getting up, and I'm just watching it slowly get taller. What the hell is going on? And once it stood up and started to turn around, I was taking off. I took off running.
Yeah.
And went down one of the trails. Well, as it turns out, my friend PJ was on another trail that kind of intersects with the one I was on.
Yeah.
He thought he had to jump on me. And roughly about the same time, he was taking shots at what he thought was me. And it stood up. When it stood up, it looked at him first, then it came to look at me, and I started running when it started turning my direction. And when I got to the intersection of the trail, he about plowed me over. And we both stood up and kind of looked at each other like, what the hell is going on? That wasn't you, right? Like, no. And we looked over, and it was whatever it was, which we believe was a Sasquatch, was walking towards us.
Oh, jeez.
The thing was massive.
Yeah. And
it wasn't running. It was moving quickly, but it was walking, if that makes sense. You can tell.
It's basically like speed walking with the purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But probably because it just has such longer legs, it takes bigger steps. To us, it probably looked like it was moving fast. That's probably just how it walked.
Yeah.
And we both took one look as this thing kind of started to approach, and we took off. I mean, we ran like hell back to the place to get inside as quickly as possible. And then we're looking out the back window to see if it followed us, and it didn't.
Yeah.
So we spent the next 6-8 hours all night talking about it, trying to figure out what we saw. We were debating if we should go back out there. Neither one of us was interested in going back out there at night. We had no idea. It didn't dawn on us at first that we had seen a Bigfoot. We just, it caught us off guard completely. All weekend we've been alone. We've been out there at night before. This wasn't our first time there, you know what I mean? So we've never seen anything before. And by the time the morning hit, we came to the conclusion that there was no other explanation. It had to be a Sasquatch. Because it was bipedal, walked on 2 legs. It didn't seem like the paintballs were really affecting it. It was almost like it was getting bit by a mosquito or something. You know what I mean? It just didn't seem to really notice that much or care.
Yeah.
And it made a conscious decision not to pursue us.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Because originally I always said, well, maybe it's a bear. And then we talked about it. Well, no, because a bear wouldn't be that much taller than I am.
Yeah, a bear wouldn't walk like that either.
No. It would have gone on all fours and charged us if we were shooting something at it.
Yeah.
It would have reacted in defense. This did not do that. It came closer, took a look at us, made a conscious decision not to pursue us. And then we saw it kind of starting to walk, and then we took off. But the fact that it walked along, how tall it was, the fact that it made a decision not to come after us, that was there's no other explanation that it had to be a Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the neighboring properties are older; they're farms, so there are hundreds of acres all around them. So who knows where it came from? How many were out there? We just saw the one. The next morning, when it was nice and bright, we went out and tried to retrace our steps. And I mean, to this day, I could still tell you exactly where on the trail it was. I'll never forget it. And we've gone out there before and just kind of looked around. And the next day, we didn't. I would have looked for different things now than we did then. We just kind of wanted to see where the paint, like if there was paintball marks on trees, things like that. So we figured out, okay, so we were definitely shooting. This is the direction. This is where it was. And we looked around. We didn't see any footprints. It was fall. The ground was still hard. So it wasn't like it had been raining or muddy. Mm-hmm. And then we just kind of slowly, cautiously creeped along the trail. We walked the whole trail system and slowly worked our way through the woods, looking to see if we could find anything. And we never saw a trace of it. Now I would look for different things. I would probably have a magnifying glass. I would look for hair, perhaps, maybe caught on a tree. I'd look for snapped twigs, tree branches perhaps snapped higher than we would normally expect, things like that.
Yeah.
But at the time, we just didn't know. You didn't know what we knew now.
Yeah.
And over the years, I've gone back out there at night, during the day, in the morning, slept out the woods a couple times, and I've never seen anything like it since. And during that time in the 90s, over the years, I've done research, and there was a decent amount of Sasquatch sightings in Erie County, Pennsylvania, as well as Ashtabula County, which is the Ohio side of that line, which is only by car, 15 minutes. And it's at that time, you could get from Pennsylvania to Ohio walking through the woods. It was Ashtabula County has only been developed in the last 5 or 10 years, so it's still very rural at that time.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of water sources, there's rivers, there's streams, the lake isn't too far. And so there's been a lot of sightings in that area during the 90s, and even since the 90s, there still continues to be sightings in that area today.
Yeah.
So I suspect they're still around.
Yeah.
The Ohio side has built up, so my guess is they've shifted wherever it is that they hide out, so to speak.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's a cave system that we're unaware of. Ohio does have some pretty large cave systems. Not all of them have been completely explored.
Yeah.
I don't know if they have some way to blend into the wilderness that we're not aware of. I've talked to people who think they travel through portals. I'm not saying that they do or don't.
Yeah.
Based on what we saw, in my opinion, it was a biological creature. I don't think it had any supernatural abilities. At least there was nothing that we saw in the brief time we saw it to let me think to that. We didn't stay long enough to watch it walk away and see where it went, if it was just going to pop and disappear into thin air. We were... now if I saw something now, I would stick it out. I would go for it. I wouldn't be able to resist.
Oh, for sure, man. I was writing down some notes as you were talking. When it stood up, did it stand up like really quick, or did it stand up slowly?
It stood up slowly.
Okay, gotcha.
And that was another strange thing. Is it didn't seem like it was threatened by us.
Oh, yeah.
I would have expected a bear or some predator animal to react quickly. I would have thought a bear would have charged one of us or both.
Yeah.
But it didn't seem like it was afraid or cautious. It just kind of stood up. It looked at him. It started to look at me. And it was so massive. We just took off. But it didn't seem like it was... like I said, it wasn't running, it was walking. It didn't seem like there was any urgency as far as dealing with us or us being a threat.
Yeah.
But it makes me think that they are relatively intelligent, at least enough to recognize and make a conscious decision not to pursue
Yeah.
For all we know, I mean, they could be as intelligent as we are or smarter. I have no idea, but it definitely seems like it knew what it was doing. It knew we weren't a threat.
Yeah.
I don't know if they have some kind of sense. I don't know how they determine threats. We would have acted a certain way if it would have behaved differently. But since we took off running, maybe it just figured we were more scared of it than it was of us. So that's all. That was fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Not only that, too, I like to think that Bigfoot and Sasquatch, I like to think that they're very, very, very intelligent. And I think he made the conscious decision, like he knew you guys were young. Not only that, in my opinion, he didn't smell any gunpowder. So he probably figured, those ain't real guns. And I know they know what they are. But as far as because you guys basically unloaded on this dude with paintballs.
Oh, yeah.
So did any of his hair get blasted up with paint?
Not that I could see. It was so dark.
Yeah.
I know I hit it, but I don't know. And that was the thing is, if I would have stuck around longer and gotten closer to it, we might have been able to see paint marks on it. But we took off running, so
yeah, it kind of makes me think like, yeah, it kind of makes me think like since you took a couple shots at it, and then your buddy did. If his hair and hide was so thick, like the ball just went through the hair, and then when it finally hit the hide, it exploded, but it was covered with so much hair, it almost like covered it. You know what I'm saying? Unless he moved his hair like that, then you're able to see, oh, look, there's the paint. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
I've often wondered because if the hair was as thick as I think it was, if he even really, I don't know that he felt it that much.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was almost like he was having like a thick sweater on, the way the hair looked, at least from what I could tell. So I've always wondered that maybe he didn't really notice that much because the hair, and they were cheap paintball guns, so they were from Walmart. They weren't really, they were like little CO2 cartridges. They were like $30. They weren't high powered either.
Yeah.
So you had to be pretty close, relatively close to get something anyways. And even then, it didn't have that much of an impact,
Oh, yeah, I guarantee he really didn't feel much. He's like, what the heck was that?
No,
and then
we were wearing T-shirts and shooting at each other because it didn't hurt that much, So I doubt with his hair that he felt it that much. I think he was aware something was happening. I don't think he knew what was happening.
Yeah.
And my guess is they probably can either through smell or some other sense or combination of senses. I would imagine they can sense when there's something is afraid of them or sense fear. A lot of animals can.
Yeah.
And I would imagine we were scared shitless. So I would imagine it probably knew that was the case.
Oh yeah. I think it did, man. I really do. Now, did you guys smell anything? Because how they always say you got these smells. Like some people smell like a nasty odor with these things, and some people don't.
So I don't have a particularly good sense of smell. I never have.
Yeah.
I can barely smell anything ever. My friend PJ didn't get as close to it as I did, but as far as I know, and we're still best friends till this day, we talk about it all the time. There was no odor that we're aware of.
Yeah.
Not to say that if he hadn't got closer, he would have smelled something that I wouldn't have. But there's also dozens of ponds, little lakes, streams, and stuff like that. So it's possible they bathe just like we do to some extent, maybe not as often, but I would imagine they probably wouldn't want to. I've always wondered about the smelling because it seems like they go out of their way to avoid contact with humans. And one sure way to attract us is to have a smell, or any other predator for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always wondered if they kind of bathe in some way, because a lot of people say they smell them, like the skunk ape in Florida. And I think, well, maybe because it's Florida and the skunk ape is typically seen in swampier areas, it's hot, it's humid. Perhaps it fires just like we do. And that time of the year in Pennsylvania at night, it was like 60, 65 degrees out. So maybe it wasn't sweating per se. That it had bathed recently. There's certainly plenty of places out there that no one would ever know. No one would ever see it. And maybe that's why they do that. So it's just, because they clearly go out of their way to avoid us. And they do a very good job at it.
Very good job, yeah.
So,
as far as that, did you hear any screams or anything like that? Did it scream at you guys or anything? Nothing?
no screams, no whistles. We didn't hear any wood knocks or tree knocks, anything like that. It just it stood up. It almost seemed like it was as shocked as we were that we were seeing it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
mean? It probably wasn't expecting us out there because my parents, it was just a place we would go on the weekends sometimes. So it's not like anybody was there at any given regular basis.
Yeah.
So weeks would go, sometimes months, where no one would be there. So it may not have even realized that there was anybody occupying when it was moving through that area. So it may have just been just as surprised as we were to see us as we were to see him,
Yeah. Now, when it turned and looked at you, did it have the look of like, oh, crap? Or was it like, oh, come on, guys, what are you guys doing here? Like its eyes. If you can remember that, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I can remember. Because I didn't get a good look at his face because I was too busy running.
Yeah.
Once it was taller than me and it started to turn and I could see that it had a facial feature on. Yeah. I have never ran that fast in my life before or since.
Yeah. And then you said did your buddy run into you too?
Oh, he about plowed me over because I wasn't even looking.
Yeah.
And he was flying up and he was looking kind of at it, like to the right, or I'm sorry, it would have been his left.
Yeah.
Into the woods. I was my right. And we're kind of, I'm looking like this. He's doing the same thing. And we're coming in just kind of collided into each other.
Yeah.
And, look, did you see that? He said, yeah, what is it? I don't know. And he's 6'3", 6'4", you know what I mean? So we're not small guys, you know what I mean? But it was huge. Yeah. Just towering. And, we weren't interested in finding out what it was. We both knew it wasn't human. There was no question about that.
Yeah.
And if it was something, we were running like you cannot believe.
Bad out of hell, man. I don't blame you guys, man. I'd be out of there too. Shoot. Now, as far as that, because like with the missing 411 and all that, do you guys have like a lot of like missing people around that area?
Not really. Nothing above average. It doesn't seem like most of the Swatch encounters around us are aggressive.
Gotcha. Okay.
There's some people I've met that say that they throw rocks at the house or they hear weird noises at night, things like that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like they're aggressive. They don't seem to go looking for people. They don't seem to. It's not like in Alaska where people disappear and there's like a belief that they have their own territory. It just seems like they're kind of passing through almost. Yeah. Moving around. And they're just trying to avoid us and they're not interested in what we're doing.
Yeah, I got you, man.
But,
I got you.
Yeah, I've read about that where there's other people have had encounters. And even in Ohio in the early 1900s, there were newspaper articles where people had disappeared and some people thought it was Sasquatch related. But to my knowledge, in recent years, none of that has taken place. All of the sightings have kind of been, perhaps it was crossing the road. Some people have seen it by the Ohio River a lot because it's very rural.
Yeah.
And for them, it's probably a lot easier to cross than it would be a person with the current because they're bigger, they weigh more, they take bigger steps.
Yeah.
It's dense forest there. Not a lot of people go back there. A lot of it's protected by state parks and things like that are hundreds, sometimes thousands of acres. So I would imagine they move around in there.
Yeah. Pretty
well avoiding us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure on that, man. Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder too, because just being in this industry and stuff, because like you said, Alaska for one, and then you got like the Northwest. I noticed with each pocket, to me, they're almost kind of like races, right? Like certain people are more aggressive than others. To me, kind of like the same thing. Like the ones in the South are pretty aggressive. The ones in the Northwest are kind of hit and miss. The ones in Alaska, the Indians always talk about how freaking aggressive they are. Midwest, not so much. Just kind of passing through. your guys' area, kind of the same thing, but it's kind of like hit or miss as well. But also, to me, it also depends on which one like you run into. You know, you could be running into one, it could be having like a bad day, you know, or like you guys, you ran into one and it's just just doing his thing, and he's like, oh crap, okay, I'm gonna get out of here. Like seriously,
Oh
like,
yeah.
that's Because honestly, man, because if that guy wanted you, man, he could have got you straight up.
Sure. If he wanted to come at us at high speed, as strong as I suspect that they are to be that big to walk around, I would assume the strength goes with it. Then it could have grabbed us both and snapped us like twigs.
Yeah.
And there's nothing we could have done about it.
Yeah. But also, too, I really like to think it made a good conscious decision. Like, I think it would have been different if there was just one of you. Now, since he saw two, I'm thinking, he probably would have put the equation together. Like, I could, but these guys might put up a fight, and I don't want that.
Yeah, that's true. Or just because he saw two, maybe he thought there could have been more of us.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Let's see. I wrote some on notes.
But yeah, I agree with the different species of Sasquatch. I think that they have probably evolved over time to suit their environment. That's why they're so hostile in Alaska. It's such a harsh environment as it is. Plus, there's so many other mysterious phenomena that take place up there that could be causing them to be more aggressive and protective.
Yeah.
Perhaps the population is larger. Perhaps there's even a difference of culture between, say, the Midwest Sasquatch and the killer Bigfoot or hairy man or any of the other dozens of names they have for him up there.
Yeah.
And that, same thing with the South and Midwest. They've just been in these pockets isolated from each other for so long, and they've adapted to survive to that particular climate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree too. And not only that, going with like Native American lore as well. I know certain tribes had, I guess, treaties with certain Bigfoot, and then other ones, they're basically like at war with them. You know what I'm saying? But yeah. To me, dude, that was probably the most perfect Bigfoot encounters you can get. You guys were safe. You freaking literally saw it right in front of you, and then you guys got out of there. So, dude, that's crazy, man. What does your friend think about it? Like,
we're pretty much on the same page.
Yeah.
We talked about it over the years. We still talk about it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
when after we got married, we were telling our wives about it, and they're like, "Oh, it was a bear. It was probably you guys were." We're like, "No, it couldn't have been because it didn't go on four legs at any point. A bear could stand up for a few feet maybe, but it's not going to walk towards us.
Yeah.
And a black bear is not going to be 9-10 feet tall. There's no way. It's not like it's some kind of grizzly bear.
Yeah. Not only that though, bears walk funny too. They don't walk in a good stride motion. They don't walk with flow.
No, they don't have any intent unless they're on all fours and then they're coming at you.
Yeah.
And they're really, at that time, there wasn't very many bear sightings in that area.
Yeah.
So that's out of the question. But that was their thing. And we're like, no. And we've taken them through it over and over again. They're both skeptics. And we're like, well, we know what we saw. You'll never convince us otherwise.
I got you, man. Let me see real quick. Do you and your buddy do any hunting out there or fishing or anything like that? Do you guys ever go out in the woods a lot? Camping, stuff like that?
Camping, I go out in the woods a lot camping. I'm not a hunter or a fisher. I'm usually looking for more evidence. I'm trying to find proof, a footprint, hair sample, trying to have another encounter.
Yeah.
We have Salt Fort State Park here in Ohio, and that there's dozens of encounters every year.
Yeah.
People find evidence down there. So sometimes I'll go down there and I'll try to look around. There's Hocking Hills.
Yeah.
That there's a lot of encounters. We have Wayne National Forest that's something like 200,000 some acres, which I'm convinced that if that's all right in that same area, and there's enough woods where you can get from one to the other. So there's plenty of room and really unexplored areas that they could, because it's all protected, that they could be hiding him down there.
Yeah.
I go to West Virginia sometimes, especially if there's a rash of sightings somewhere. I'll try to go pop a tent somewhere and set up some trail cameras and walk around and see if I can find anything.
Yeah.
It's a lot of it. Unfortunately, a lot of this is going out and just not finding anything, but keep going,
Yeah. Oh, I hear you, man. I hear you 100%. And, as well as I am too. I actually have like a group of guys. We go out, we research, we try to like track and not hunt these things, but we try to track them down, try to get like as much evidence as we can. But like, honestly, like 90% of the time, dude, it's like a bust. But in my opinion, you're going out, you're freaking like, sharpening like your craft, you know what I'm saying? Are you linked up with any BFRO or anything like that out there? Like when you go out, or any communities?
No, I generally go out on my own. I communicate with some other groups through my website, cryptidparanormal.com.
Yeah.
And things like that. And, I message with other groups on Facebook and other social media platforms, just kind of sharing information. It's always good to see what everyone else is seeing, what they've encountered. Even skeptics, it's always nice to hear objections. Why? Because it's just one more. If I can answer that question, that's just one more objection overruled.
Yeah.
So I like to communicate. I go to different festivals, conferences, meetups, that kind of thing, just to hear people talk to other groups, other people, show them some pictures of stuff. This is what I've seen. This is where I've gone.
Yeah.
There's weird noises I found here. I picked up on recordings. I don't know what they are. I can't prove it's anything. I just can't identify it,
I got you.
And see if anybody else has been in those areas. And sometimes they'll come across somebody and they'll say, yeah, that's Salt Lake or Salt Fork State Park in Southern Ohio. That's initially how, because I had gone to Hocking Hills a few times and I connected with some people and they said, no, Salt Fork, you got to go there. That's where a bunch of sightings happen. And there's a couple that they don't live too far from where I am that I connected with. And they said, yeah, we've seen them twice down there over the last 10 years. And I said, I need to get down there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, as far as like your expeditions, you going out, have you casted any footprints or anything like that?
I haven't unfortunately seen any footprints.
Yeah. I got you, man.
I wish. I've met other people who have, but I've never had the pleasure, unfortunately, myself. And I don't know, I kind of wonder sometimes, do they try not to leave evidence like that intentionally? Because it does seem they are rare. It's always interesting to see these castings that people get. Yeah. Because the size and the shape makes me think that there are female and male, and there's a significant size difference just based on the length and width of the foot. Yeah,
not only that too, if you're dealing like a juvenile as well, you know what I mean? And what's funny is, 2 weeks ago, like me and my team, we just went on this operation. We saw a bunch of footprints, but the thing I'm always having a problem with is, there's always just one. Where's the second one? Where's the third one? Where's the fourth one? You know what I mean? It's always just like one and done. And like to me, like I think these things are so intelligent. Like if they want you to see it, they'll let you see them. But also too, like you, right? You just snuck up on one, and he was like, "Holy crap! Like, what are you boys doing out here?" Let's see. Dude, there is like no right or wrong answer with this. What do you think Bigfoot is?
I suspect. Well, I have a couple theories. One, that he's the missing link in the human evolution from chimpanzee to human. Mm-hmm. Or, is science, according to the current scientific theories, that there were multiple species of humans that all existed at one point in time. 4 or 5, however there were. And, there's Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal, and a couple others that either interbreeded or one became the dominant species and killed the other one off.
Gotcha. Okay.
I wonder if perhaps all of them didn't die off. One of them evolved differently, more primate-like than we did.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, they didn't populate like we did, whether it's they don't have the same ability to birth like we can, or they simply made different cultural choices to live with the land and not retrofit it to fit their own needs.
Okay, interesting. I like that. Okay.
Because if you look at a lot of Native American legends, as you mentioned earlier, they lived side by side, the Sasquatch, at one point. They had peace treaties. Some of them even consider them not humans, but another species of human.
Yes.
And that always made me wonder if they really did live side by side, and there must have been communication for them to have a treaty. They must have had some way to communicate, whether it's knocks on trees, it's sign language, a written language, or some kind of verbal. Maybe I don't know. Maybe they have the ability to speak in some language or another, or understand us and somehow communicate back, even if they can't use a language. I mean, we know gorillas and chimpanzees and whatnot can learn sign language.
Yes.
So it stands to reason that the Native American population could have figured out a way to communicate with them and therefore coexist with them at some point. And I know from legends of the First Nations people in Canada, there were a couple of tribes up there that worship the Sasquatch as deities. And they, in their oral history, they all once lived together, and the Sasquatches were kind of their guardians.
Gotcha. They're like the
and then eventually, as the Europeans started to come into the picture, they did not approve of what was happening, basically tearing down forests and retrofitting the land and things like that. So they kind of disappeared because they didn't want to have anything to do with us anymore. Now up there, they believe they're spiritual, and they travel through portals and some kind of the next place, and there's certain rock faces that allegedly have mystical properties, or some way that they can come back and forth from this world and whatever's next, or next to us, or some other frequency. I don't think they have supernatural powers. I suspect if they are really using portals, and I've met a lot of people who say they were there 1 second and gone the next. I would think that either the portals exist naturally and they somehow have learned how to use them. Perhaps our ancestors did too, and that knowledge got forgotten as society evolved and we stopped believing things we couldn't understand. Now it's like, if you see something, well, that's not possible. You can't be true.
Yeah.
Or it is possible. We just don't know how to explain it yet because we haven't reached the level of science to come up with those answers. But that doesn't mean it's not happening.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they're not using some kind of portal system. Or I've talked to people who think that there's an extraterrestrial presence, that something else made these portals and then they use these portals to come back and forth, that they had communication with something else other than us, and perhaps we did too. And again, that's just something that got lost through the ages.
Yeah.
I don't think they're supernatural.
Yeah.
I think another possibility of how they disappear, how some owls can blend in and some animals can change color, or lizards,
yes.
They can look. I can't remember what the owl's called. I just found a picture of it the other day. And it was in a tree, and you had to zoom in to really look because it turned to the color of the tree and it blended right in, didn't move an inch.
Yeah.
I wonder if they can do something similar to that, if they're able to change how they look as a defense mechanism.
Yeah. Almost like a chameleon.
Yeah. You know what I mean? And that would give them the ability to hide in bushes easier if they can change their color. If you see it and it looks one way, you're looking for this giant thing standing up, and then it moves into something thick. It changes color, or maybe it lays down. It could give the appearance of disappearing. That's not necessarily what's happening. It's just simply harder to see.
Yeah, just blended into his background. Yeah.
And that may have been how they survived all these years.
Yeah.
Another possibility I've considered is our visual spectrum is very limited. Perhaps they're able to change colors to some type of color that we're not able to process. Our vision can't quite see.
Yeah.
That makes them not quite necessarily invisible, but just out of our perception. That allows us to kind of walk by and not realize they're there.
You know what, dude? That is okay. Out of all the podcasts I've done, your answer is probably the most detailed and probably like one of the best answers I've heard so far.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I agree with you 100% on that. I also think that too, since we've culturalized ourselves, since we've did all that, I agree. I think we've lost that certain sight, that certain feeling of, oh gosh, since we're just looking at like buildings and stuff like that, we're very modernized now, right? I think we've lost that, on how to catch things out in the wilderness and stuff like that. Yeah, that was bravo, man. That was really good.
Thank
Really,
you.
really good. That was really good, man. Very, very detailed. I like that.
Thank you.
Let's see. Yeah. So other than that, have you had anything else with Bigfoot or anything like that? Was that the only thing?
For Bigfoot, that was the only thing. I've encountered some paranormal activity. I do everything. I'm not completely convinced it's not all interconnected.
Yeah.
I did see a ghost while I went to Columbus State Community College in Columbus, Ohio. One of the buildings was haunted. I did see something. I didn't know it was a ghost at first. It wasn't until after the fact that I realized what it was when somebody told me about the story. It was haunted and what the lady looked like. And I was like, that's exactly what I saw.
Yeah.
And, I was already had the Sasquatch encounter before. So by that point, I was solidified. I was in for life,
Yeah, I know. Yeah. O'Brien caught the bug.
Oh, yeah, I was done. I was like 20. I'm like, it's it. I'm a lifer now,
Yeah.
The most recent experience was in Blennerhassett Island off of Parkersburg, West Virginia.
Yeah.
I went there with Marietta Touring Company. The island has a mansion. It's a couple hundred years old. It was occupied by Native Americans for thousands of years before the Europeans came.
Yeah.
They had a lot of battles amongst themselves. After the Europeans settled, of course, they killed off most of the Indian population. And it became privatized, and they bought, had a house built and all these things. Well, when it became a state park and they started doing renovations, they found hundreds of bodies buried all over the place.
Okay.
From Indian battlegrounds. The park guide when I was there said that they had found a body with a tomahawk in the skull.
Oh wow! Okay.
There was only a small section we were allowed to pitch a tent because they didn't want us sleeping on top of where they know there was a burial ground, which was most of the island.
Yeah.
And people have seen things there for years. Ghosts, people have seen shadow creatures, people have seen things they can't explain.
Yeah.
The maintenance workers who take care of the island will not stay past dark. They refuse to stay on the island. So there's you have to take a ferry. There's no other way to get there.
Okay.
So there's a ferry that goes from Parkersburg, and the park ranger said, well, all the maintenance staff is leaving because it's 4:00 and they won't stay.
Yeah.
And we, of course, I couldn't help it. Well, why would they stay? This is great. And he said, because they claim that there's stuff in the woods. Like, yes, that's fantastic. I hope there is. And there was a couple other paranormal groups. So we started looking around. Everyone's setting up their thing. They gave us a tour of the island. And I was in the mansion by myself. It was around 1 a.m., 1 a.m. I was on the second floor, and I got a feeling like you ever get a gut feeling like you're in danger, like your fight or flight instinct kicks in?
Yeah.
But in hyperdrive.
Yeah.
And I don't mind being in the dark. I'm not afraid of it. I don't think there's anything that can hurt me. You know what I mean? But I'm telling you, there was something in me. Like I felt, I've never felt like that before or since, that I should not be there. And I tried to tough it out. And eventually I went downstairs.
Yeah.
I stepped outside for a minute. And as soon as I walked through the front door, it's gone. I stood there for a second. I looked around. There's nobody else around. So I said, "Oh, I'm going back in." So I went back in, and there's a study to the left, and there was a bedroom on the right of the study. And I'm standing in the study looking around, and I have an app on my phone that measures sound decibels, and it has the range for conversation level, and then above a certain range, somebody would have to be screaming.
Yeah.
I'm holding as still as I can, trying to breathe light, because if you breathe heavy, this thing would pick it up.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the thing starts spiking up, like someone was screaming, but there was no noise. I couldn't hear anything. The decibels it was at was well within the range of human hearing. Someone should have been screaming.
Yeah.
But there was nothing. And I looked around, and then I looked to my right. I saw what had human characteristics, but was the darkest darkness I've ever seen. It was dark in there, but it was almost like the dark was so dark it stood out of the darkness.
Yeah.
And it like laid onto the bed and kind of slithered over to the other side. And it was almost like it was drinking my vision. It was so black. It was like looking into a bottomless pit.
Yeah.
It was the most unusual feeling. And my first instinct was, okay, there has to be an explanation for this.
Yeah.
And the folks from the Marietta Tour Company said that they have seen multiple shadow creatures in the house, around and on the island over the years. I had never seen one before. So I went outside. I did a perimeter walk around to make sure there was nobody else around. There's no lights. There's nothing that I could have misunderstood what I saw. Couldn't find anything. There was a bonfire where everybody was sitting around as, we were wrapping up. So I went up and I asked everybody, so was anyone around the house at this time? Was anyone using any lights, anything like that? Everybody said, no, I was by myself.
Yeah.
And I cannot explain what the hell that thing was, but it is probably the most unusual thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And since then, this was last August, I've done a lot of research because I was kind of skeptical about the shadow people.
Yeah.
I thought perhaps the sleep paralysis was a logical explanation to me. There's articles from the Cleveland Clinic where they talk about sleep paralysis and why you see a dark figure. And I said, okay, well, that kind of makes sense. Maybe it's your mind playing tricks on you.
Yeah.
I was wide awake, 2 monsters in. I mean, I was feeling great. I was not sleeping, nor was my mind playing tricks on me. I was amped for this for weeks to get to this island. And I just could not figure out what it was. And all the research I've done since, shadow creatures go back thousands of years. I found them in Native American lore. I found they go back as far as Mesopotamia, has references to them. I don't know what they are. I watched a show. I don't know if you're familiar with the Alaskan Triangle.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
A really great show. And the guy who wrote the book that the show is based off of he's actually from Akron, Ohio.
Yeah.
And I listened to one of his audio books, and when he was stationed in the Air Force in Alaska, he talked about seeing these shadow beings.
Okay.
And originally I was skeptical of that until I saw what I saw and then that's when I started diving into the research because I'm obsessed. I can't figure out what it is.
Yeah.
And I've talked to other people that have seen these things, and not all of them have been asleep. Some of them are very much wide awake.
Mm-hmm.
Most people seem to get a sense of fear from these things. They feel that they are hostile in some way. Some people think that they are demonic. It didn't do anything aggressive to me. I'm not even sure if it knew I was there, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I have different theories about these things. Researching it, part of me wonders if it is the echo of something that happened.
Okay.
Literally a psychic echo of
Yeah.
an event that was so traumatic that something is left behind.
Yeah.
The other possibility is it's some kind of, perhaps it's bleeding over from another dimension, as strange as that sounds.
No, I hear you. Keep going.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
not in our dimension, but for some reason, part of it is bleeding over. So it's just doing its thing. And part of me wonders if it was walking somewhere else and the image was just partially bleeding over. Maybe there's some kind of weak spot, or there's some reason that we're able to see them in certain spots, but they don't necessarily know that we're there any more than we know what they are.
You know what would be a trip? Okay, is that because this kind of brought to my mind when you're talking about that. Okay, since you see them, like you said, what if it's another time period, right? But let's say like they see you and you're the shadow person of them. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
I wonder that same thing. If there's, there's theories out there that there's other dimensions next to ours, different frequencies, things like that.
Yeah.
Different, you could be out of phase with one dimension, or maybe perhaps there's some kind of in-between dimensional spots where energy can exist or travel. And I wonder if that's what that is. Those are weak spots, but it looks like they're watching us because we're watching them.
Yeah.
Maybe they have no idea what we are, and they have no idea that they're appearing to us as shadow creatures, and they're in their own dimension, timeline, parallel universe, whatever you want to call it, and they have no idea what's going on either.
Yeah.
And they're just as intrigued. I mean, the other possibility is that they are some kind of explorer, whether they are from another dimension, another place in time, they're from another planet, whatever the case may be, or they're some other kind of living being that has evolved on this planet that we're unaware of because they're so different than we are.
Yeah.
And they don't exist necessarily corporeal as we do. They don't have a physical form.
Yeah.
And they're just simply watching us, trying to figure out what the hell's going on. What are we doing? Trying to learn. Perhaps they're trying to communicate with us. But I've also talked to people who claim that they have scratched them, or they have, you read the stories, and I've talked to a guy who said that one sat on his chest.
Mm-hmm.
He woke up and it was trying to suffocate him. So I don't know. But it also, like we talked about with Sasquatch, are they all the same thing? Or are there more of these creatures? For example, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Hat Man.
Yep, I heard of the Hat Man.
So my question has always been, first of all, why does he wear a hat? That drives me crazy. Some people say a top hat. Some people say a cowboy hat. Some people say a fedora. I've heard a couple other different hats. Why a hat? Why those specific hats? Why is the hat so visible and nothing else?
Yeah.
And is he the same as the other shadow creatures that people are seeing, or is he something completely different? Is there a hierarchy in the shadow being culture community, and he's wearing a hat to differentiate himself for some reason, that he's some other higher being or a leader to them?
Okay.
So,
That's some pretty good theories, man. You ever heard of a woman named Vicky Joy?
I don't think that I have.
Okay, Vicky Joy Anderson. Okay, she is probably one of the, in my opinion, she's probably one of the leading, I should say, investigators and researchers when it comes to sleep paralysis, dude. I'll send you some of her stuff. She's got some really good theories, man. Really good theories. And she actually wrote a book. It's titled "They Only Come Out at Night," and she gathers so much history, so much information, all the way back to Babylon on shadow creatures and also sleep paralysis throughout history. And she brings it in with like the Persians, the Egyptians, the biblical narrative, and all that. And it's really freaking interesting. Really good information, man. But yeah, she is a whiz on that. I have no. Yeah, she's just a whiz at that. So it's really interesting. I'll send you a lot of her information. You can just comb through it, man.
Yeah, please do. I like to read that book.
Yeah. Yeah, man, that's crazy. I've actually I've had my own I've actually had sleep paralysis 3 times, and I saw shadow people. I have too as well. So
when you saw them, were they holding still in the corner out of the side of your eye, or was it direct vision?
no, it was actually in my like direct line of sight. So in a nutshell, this happened when I think it was around like 8 years old, but the house I was living in at the time, it was actually built over a certain burial ground as well. And the people that lived in that house before that, they were doing like rituals and stuff like that. I found all this out later on, like when I was older. But I lived with my aunt and my mom at the time, and my mom, she worked 2 jobs, and my aunt, she worked I think it was like second shift or third shift at the time. Well, anyways, my mom got home late. She went to bed. My aunt got back home. She went to bed, and I was up in the living room playing video games. And I fell asleep on the couch. The way our couch was positioned, it was looking at the stairs that were going up diagonally up to my room and to my mom's room. Well, I woke up, and the TV back then, if you're watching a show or something, because after I was done playing video games, I was watching I forgot Price is Right or something like that, like reruns of it. And then I woke up, and like the TV was just static, right? And then as I'm like looking at the stairwell, I'm seeing these, they look like Victorian figures going up and down the stairs. It's like there's a party upstairs, but there's just tons of these shadow people going up and down. These girls look like they're wearing like those big old bonnet dresses, and then you got guys that are wearing top hats and canes going up and down these stairs. And as I'm looking, I'm seeing them, and all of a sudden all of them stop and they turn, and they're just all staring at me. I feel it. Well, I'm so scared from the fear, I pass out. And then I wake up with my aunt tickling my feet, telling me, hey, get up, it's time to eat. And I was like, what the freak was that about? But yeah, that was just, that was crazy.
Were they as dark? Did they appear as dark to you as it did to me?
100%, dude. Yeah, like it felt like to me, if I shined a flashlight, the light would just suck in the darkness. Like they were so freaking dark. Like it was dark, but from the TV was like illuminating, and it had like that static. You know how the TV is? It kind of shows kind of like an outlay of light, but it's still shadowy, right? Those things were so freaking dark, man. But I can clearly see like the silhouettes of them now. Yeah. Very, very dark.
That's fascinating. And there's multiple beings there.
Oh, yeah. To me, I think I counted, there was like 15 of them going up and down. And they all just stopped and turned.
Did you feel a sense of personal dread or anything like that?
Yeah, I was scared. 100% dread, and I passed out because I was so scared.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And is that the first and only time you saw them?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yep. Yeah. So
that's fascinating because are you familiar with Ed and Lorraine Warren?
Yes.
Yeah, I read his book, or a book based on them called The Demonologist, and they kind of touched on that, the shadow people a little bit.
Yeah.
That, people, like you said, if they were performing rituals, perhaps with a Ouija board or a seance, sometimes you can open a door that's you can't necessarily close.
Yep.
And sometimes something will pass through. And if the door is left open, other things that over time will eventually pass through, and it can eventually make a house or wherever the structure is become supernaturally charged or dangerous, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. That was my little theory. Other than that, brother, we're coming up on the hour. What This is an oddball question. I'm sure you have because you're in the whole cryptid community and stuff. What do you think about Dogman?
It's funny you mentioned that. I was thinking so. I know a lot of people seem to think it's a a government experiment or an interdimensional being. Seems to be the premise of what I've gathered talking to a lot of people. I've been doing a lot of research the last few weeks on Dogman. My original hypothesis is that people were seeing the Sasquatch and just
Gotcha.
misinterpreting what they're seeing, but I don't think that's true anymore.
Yeah.
I found accounts of Dogman all the way back to Egypt, ancient Greece. The Egyptians, for example, the god Anubis had the head of a dog, but walked like a man. And there's several variations of stories. I think that the Greeks have some version of it. It turns out the Celtics also have some version of this man, but dog-like creature that's not one or the other. And I don't see how all those cultures could have communicated together. And there's Native American lore about dogmen as well. And for everything we know in history, they should not have been able to connect with each other, but yet they're describing the same creatures. And it does seem like, because we're right by Michigan, and they have a ton of sightings up there. People are seeing dogmen sightings all the time, more so even than Sasquatch. The dogmen seem to be more aggressive from what I've read about sightings. They're more dangerous, perhaps more territorial. They also seem intelligent as well because they are avoiding us. They're not necessarily hunting us. They're avoiding us, but when you do encounter one, it seems like they're much more aggressive. They're more likely to attack from what people have said. From what I understand, they've killed animals. Sometimes dogs have been killed. What are they? To me, it kind of almost goes back to the same thing with the Sasquatch. Was there another form of human or something human-like or something that just had simple characteristics of a bipedal creature that did not die out, that survived somehow? Are they interdimensional? Maybe. I don't know. If that's the case, that would explain why we've never found them. Are they in communication with the Sasquatch? Are they using the same portals? Are they using a cave system? As we do have a lot of caves in this region, that's certainly possible. They're using caves we don't discover. Can they blend in like the Sasquatch can, perhaps change color? Or are they some kind of distant cousin from the Sasquatch that they were isolated for whatever reason, their features changed? There are, like, for example, with humans, I think it's Holland, I think it is the tallest country in the world. There's more tall people there than anywhere else, although I'm sure there's a country out there that has all the shortest people too. So there's reasons for that. There's a lack of genetic diversity in certain traits take. So I have to wonder if the dogmen and some other cryptids were in that same kind of the case where they were isolated, but they all evolved from a similar. Or perhaps there's something completely different, that simply maybe comes from somewhere. Maybe there is a cave system that they live in. Perhaps they are from another dimension. I don't know. There's so many interesting theories about Dogman, and doesn't seem like there's as much proof. There's not really any photos. There's no videos like with Bigfoot in the 1978 film or the Gremlin film, and there's not a lot of footprints or hair samples. Talk to people that have seen them. I met with a guy about a week ago that said he saw one in Salt Fork State Park.
Yeah,
which that's the first I had heard that. I've always heard Sasquatches down there. I'd not heard a dogman sighting. Back in the 70s, there were a rash of dogman sightings in Alliance, Ohio, that went over a period of months, and then they faded away. But to this day, all through the northern part and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, dogman is a very prominent thing that people see in the woods, and it's very vast.
Yeah,
they have a lot of ATV trails. There's a lot of public land that's protected, thousands and thousands of acres. It's very thick. Some of it's swampy. Some of it is so thick you almost need a machete to cut through it. So there's plenty of places for them to hide. I'm not completely sure what they are. I still don't think. I know some Native American tribes has depicted them as spiritual, very much so, like the Sasquatch. I disagree. I think they're biological if they're out there. I think if they're anything like the Sasquatch, there's a certain level of intelligence that they would have to avoid us from catching pockets of them or finding where they live or simply capturing them. There has to be some established language or way to communicate with each other. And clearly they must be looking out for each other, whether it's a pack mentality, a cultural thing. I don't know if, again, with the same thing with Sasquatch, perhaps their numbers and their ability to reproduce is not like ours. Maybe they can only have one offspring or two offspring. Maybe the gestation period is longer, or it's more of a difficult process and there's a higher death rate to the female of the species, or whatever the case may be, that limits their numbers, and that's why we don't see more of them. But there's so many people for thousands of years are seeing something, and this goes for the Sasquatch too. People are seeing something. And if you look, we'll say before 1980, no internet, long distance calls were massively expensive. There wasn't really a national news. Most of what you saw was local, maybe state, but you weren't really hearing about what happened in California on any kind of consistent basis. It's not like now where something happens and 30 seconds later you see it on the internet. And I think that's in our field is one of the struggles is people can make things up. People can create hoaxes because they see a couple real encounters 30 seconds after they happen. And then they come up with something and they pick different pieces, parts of stories. But if you go back into the 60s, 70s, 40s, 50s, 30s, when people were seeing these things, there was no mass communication system. They weren't communicating with each other. Native cultures weren't communicating with each other. So they're all seeing something, and it's unlikely that they could have said, hey, I saw this. Oh, we saw this too. You know what I mean? There's I don't see how it could happen. So something is out there that people are seeing. I think it's a Sasquatch. I suspect Dogman is real. I suspect a lot of other things are real too. Why we can't find them, I don't have the answer to that. But how are so many people seeing them? Where are these images coming from? How are they so clear? The same thing. They're tall, they're hairy. This one's aggressive. This one isn't. Well, how come everyone in every culture says that Dogman are aggressive? But then in Sasquatch culture, some are aggressive, some aren't. And that's the experiences people still have today. And then it takes me back to, for example, Native American artwork, like totem poles, things like that. They're referenced Sasquatches, there's Dogman reference, there's cave paintings, there's old artwork. Well, if there's no gorillas or primates in North America, then how would the native population know what a primate looked like to carve one on a totem pole for a European to come over and say, look, it's an ape? Right? They have to be seeing something to get the details so close.
Yeah, I agree, brother. Yeah, man. Yeah, dude. Definitely got to have you back on again, brother. You are a very wealth of knowledge, and I should say you got some very, very good, interesting theories, man. Good stuff, dude. Thank
you, sir. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we're coming up on that hour. Before we go, if people want to get a hold of you, where can people find you at?
CryptidParanormal.com. You can like my Facebook page, Cryptid Paranormal. And my email address is Gohard, Godhard, at CryptidParanormal.com. Feel free to hit me on Facebook, Instagram, my website. You can always get a hold of me. Email me. I'm always happy to talk to anybody, even skeptics. I love it. I love it when people challenge it. Because it helps you refine because maybe they think it's something I didn't. I've talked to skeptics that have thought of something. I'm like, oh shit, I didn't think about that. That kind of disproves it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's okay though. But then you go back to the drawing board, you look at the evidence, and you come back with something stronger that they can't disprove.
Yep.
So yeah, by all means, cryptidparanormal.com. Please reach out. I'm happy to talk to anybody.
Right on, man. Yeah. So what I usually do is I get everybody's information who I interview, and I also drop it in the show notes. So if anybody listens to this podcast, whenever I drop it, you can go ahead and hit Brian up, scroll down to the bottom, and hit it in the show notes. So, Brian, dude, I appreciate you coming on, man. I'm going to send your information out to a bunch of other buddies of mine. So they're going to try to. They're definitely. I'm going to have them get you on their shows as well too. So.
Yeah, thank you. I'd love it.
Yeah, man. Well, that's pretty much wrapping it up, man. So I appreciate you coming on, dude. Yeah, man. Definitely wealth of knowledge. Good theories, man. Definitely getting me thinking a lot on certain aspects on how to attack certain areas and stuff like that. So definitely challenged it. I'm good. I'm glad. Other than that, man, I definitely got to have you back on for sure, part 2. And yeah, man, I appreciate you, brother.
Excellent, sir. Appreciate you, and good luck on the search.
All right, man. You too, brother. All right, man. That's basically all I got. We're going to end the show. So, yeah, guys, like I said, if you guys want to get a hold of Brian, I'll have all his information in the show notes. Hit him up, wealth of knowledge. And for all you skeptics out there, hit us up. We love you guys. And, yeah, Brian, on your next research and hunts, man, be safe out there. Be safe. And, yeah, man, we'll definitely connect with you again. Yeah, man, I appreciate you. And, guys, if you got anything at all, go ahead and hit Brian up. Also, too, if you guys got any information or you guys want to talk a little bit, hit me up at cryptidwarfare@gmail.com. That's cryptidwarfare@gmail.com. I appreciate you guys, and hope you guys have a blessed week. And we'll talk to you guys later. And, Brian, don't go anywhere.
All right.